Welcome to this week's edition of Dropping Dimes here on Collider. I am your host, Matt Nost, and I am rolling solo today. It is post-All-Star break. There is not a whole heck of a lot going on. And instead of bringing a guest in to just basically shoot the breeze, I figured I'd shoot the breeze with you and just talk about what's on my mind, what we just saw over the weekend transpire, some goings-on in the league in the past few days, and then maybe projecting outward if we have the time to see where we're at with this league. So hopefully sit back, relax, and enjoy listening to the dulcet tones of Matt Nost for the next hour or so. We're going to start with the All-Star game. I was initially, upon hearing the format of the game, I was lost. I thought it was convoluted, the final fourth quarter. And I was like, I like each quarter they're playing for a charity and whatnot, and that was interesting. And then the end to me was lost. And then to see the final product, which is called the Elam Ending, it's for a man named Nick Elam, who is an education leadership professor at Ball State University. He's the one that came up with this. And they use it in the Big Three, Ice Cube's league. And in essence, if you didn't see the game, what it is quarter one. So each of the first three quarters, whoever wins that quarter goes to a charity, right? So then in the fourth quarter, they tally up all the scores, and then they added on 24 for Kobe. And whoever made it to the number of 157 first wins the game. And it was wildly entertaining, flat out. It felt like almost, a conference finals type of game. Guys were trying to take charges. They're arguing for fouls. There was that LeBron when they were down by 3 at 154 to win the game. They had to get to 157, and he pulls up from almost midcourt to launch a three, and it was pretty close. But it creates this interesting dynamic of, do you do that or do you go for the easy two and just narrow the gap to get to the final outcome of 157? And, some people online weren't the most thrilled that it came down to free throws at the end. But if you watched it, when Anthony Davis missed that first free throw, the tension in Chicago was palpable. You could feel the energy in the room. It was coming through your TV, your laptop, wherever you were watching the game. I mean, it was intense. And you're watching and you're like, oh, my God, he missed the first three free throws. Is he going to make the next one? And also watching this collapse of Giannis's team, who was up by a sizable amount. And Team LeBron closed it, ultimately won this game. And it didn't bother me at all that it was on free throws because the tension in the room was so good on those free throws. Now, people have put out ideas of maybe tweaking that. So perhaps late in game there or in the fourth quarter, free throws that you make subtract from the opposing team's score. That's interesting. I'm not against that. I mean, we've already tweaked it, and we've come out with this wildly successful format that I'm assuming they're going to keep for the All-Star game. Now, some people are saying, hey, maybe we should apply this to the league as a whole, but I just don't see the NBA doing that. If they do it, it will not be for a long, long time because there's just so many buzzer beaters alone, but we're all conditioned now since the beginning of the start of this game to now that there's a clock and you're playing against the clock and trying to score the most points before that clock runs out. So I say, obviously they're going to more than likely keep this format for the All-Star game. So there's the free throws. If you make a free throw, perhaps it subtracts from the other team's score. I like that as another wrinkle in it. I was also thinking, while they're doing this, all right, so on the free throws, what if we treated this, though, so the 157, we treat it like a game of 21 where you have to hit 157 exactly. And then if you go over, like, so you only need 2 points and for some reason you shoot a 3 and now you've gone over by 1 point, then you go down. Let's say they do that. So you're at 155 and you need to get to 157. You shoot a 3, now you got 158, but you didn't hit the 157 exactly. So if you do, in my head, if you take whatever you go in excess of the target number, so in this case 1, multiply it by 3, now you go down from 158 to 155, so now you need a 2-point bucket to win this game. So threes are not an option. So now the defense can just basically pack the paint and force you to take a long two. That's the best option you're going to get because you're not going to get anything within 12 to 14 feet. It's like, okay, that adds an interesting dynamic to this. And if you went over, if it was at 156 and for some reason you shot a 3 and went to 158, okay, now multiply that by 3. You got 6 points. Knock that off the 158. You're back to 154. So now you need, that would be 6 points. So off the 150, it'd be 152. So now you need 5 points. So you either need a 2 and a 3 or 2 2s and a free throw, unless you're going to do the free throw knocks off. It adds another specific dynamic to this. And since we're already conditioned to having this outcome, I don't think it's convoluted to add another little wrinkle to it and basically just say it's like 21. You have to hit whatever the target number is exactly. But it was super interesting to watch. And then, you're sitting there staring at it, looking at these 2 closing 5s, and Team LeBron, just on sheer talent, had such a distinct advantage to me. I mean, you've got LeBron, Kawhi, Chris Paul, AD, and James Harden. Those are your 5 out there. That's a murderer's row of guys. Versus Team Giannis, you have Giannis, Kemba, Kyle Lowry, Pascal Siakam, and Joel Embiid. And Team Giannis struggled to generate baskets late in that game. You're watching Giannis had, or not Giannis, but Embiid had that little shake, that little dream shake fade on LeBron. That was a nice move. And Kemba missed some open shots, and he made a couple. Giannis was stifled whenever he was trying to drive to the lane, which is that indicative of what's going to happen in the playoffs. And the Raptors, the 2 Raptors, outside of Lowry drawing charges and flopping all over the court, they didn't provide a whole heck of a lot of offensive boost. So Team Giannis was operating at a deficit through the tail end of that fourth quarter when on the other side you've got 5 guys that can get a bucket whenever they need to get a bucket. And Chris Paul, man, you're watching that. He looks completely revitalized. Not revitalized, but he doesn't look like he's lost a step. Playing in OKC has, I think, re-energized him to some degree because he seems happier. And when you watch that team, they seem happier overall. But, it was just really interesting. So congrats to the NBA and to Elam for coming up with this format, and for the, commissioner and Chris Paul for, basically putting the idea in everybody's head of maybe we should attempt to do this, because it was wildly entertaining. And I hope that they carry this format for the All-Star game going forward, because it adds such an intensity to the atmosphere. And I wonder if Giannis, is drafting again next year. Does he finally draft a more complete team? I like this team better than his team from last year. But at the same time, when you look at them, the 2 of them on paper, Team LeBron's, to me, was always destined to win. Just because they had so much more firepower and guys that are used to these types of situations, especially a situation where it seems playoff-esque. But it'd be interesting to see if this portends for what's going to be in the playoffs for various teams. Because when I was watching this and going, look, the Raptors have been undeniably amazing, especially in this basically nonstop win fest they've had over the past month and a half or so. But when you see 2 of their biggest guys struggling to kind of force or create any offense, is this what's going to happen in the playoffs? And for Milwaukee, is this when the defense stifles down, is this going to be a replay of what happens, what happened last year, this year in the playoffs? I don't know. Right now, they look like world beaters. Their point differential is historically great. I think it's at 11.3 right now, which all time is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, point differential. And that's with Giannis, averaging about 30 to 31 minutes a game. I mean, he's not even playing for, huge chunks. Just they're up by so much. And, if he played the entire game with all the other starters, what would their point differential end up looking like? Obviously, you don't want to do that because, why? You're winning these games. It makes no difference. Even if they could have a shot, like what if they rattled off a Raptors-esque run of wins, and they have a shot at the all-time record for 73. If they get to 74 wins, which it would be insanely difficult for them to do, but it's not impossible, obviously. Nothing is impossible. I would take the rest for the guys. Why tax them? Why do that? So, usually you walk away from the All-Star game going, that was fun. To this year, it was like, wow, that was wildly engaging, interesting. It made me think about the league as a whole, how these individual players actually stack up against each other. What is the pecking order of who the marquee stars are? And, if I was Nick Nurse, would I have kept the same type of individuals in the game, late in the game, or just put in all the starters because that's what the fans want to see, and put Trae Young back in there? And at least Trae Young is willing to jack a shot. I don't know. You just sat there watching it going, wow, this is good for the NBA, good for Adam Silver, good for Chris Paul, all involved. You guys did a heck of a job on Sunday. Saturday, on the other hand, the dunk competition. Let's talk about it, guys, because I, like most of you, am under the understanding that Aaron Gordon was robbed, flat out robbed. Was Derrick Jones Jr. Excellent? Yes, he was. But he seemed to do roughly the same dunk over and over and over again. It was cool to watch. The athleticism is off the charts. And, unbeknownst to us, in essence, he was playing for a shoe and apparel deal from Puma. I guess Puma had been talking to him all season. This finally cemented it with him. So good for him for getting paid. But so the story is that when it came down to Aaron Gordon's final dunk, the judges had a confab and said, hey, let's make this a tie at the end. And 2 of us vote 9s, the other 3 vote 10s. Then he'll have the same score as Derrick Jones Jr. And was that dunk of his where Aaron Gordon jumped over Taco Fall and dunked? And Taco Fall's 7'4", and dunked over him, but he also dragged his huevos on the back of Taco Fall's head. So it wasn't exactly a clean leap over a 7'4" guy. But, unlike other people that when they jump over, and I think Derrick Jones Jr. did it earlier, he didn't push off the guy's shoulders. If memory serves, that was a straight over the top of Taco Fall with no assist by pushing off of his shoulders. So, he came within 3 inches or so of clearing him. That's pretty impressive. But anyway, so at the last minute, Dwayne Wade changed his vote, by all accounts, to a 9, thereby screwing Aaron Gordon out of his and giving the Heat player the win. And there is no real sanctity within the dunk competition. Let's be perfectly honest. It's a competition that is just solely there for the spectacle and the entertainment and hopefully the wow factor of what, I've never seen something like that before. A la Aaron Gordon's off the side of the backboard, grab it in the air, 360, just graceful as all hell dunk. It's like, he had that one off the mascot when the mascot was on the hoverboard doing a little 360, and it was the same motion there, but still, to see that and see him glide through, really impressive. Someone put online, Kendrick Perkins was saying only former champs should be able to judge going forward, perhaps. But I saw another one where people had said, why not watch all 4 dunks and then rate 1 through 4 who had the best dunk? And maybe you do it, you give them 3 dunks or something in the first round to even it out just a little bit more, so you get a better understanding of who should move forward into the finals. But that's interesting because now it's not this everybody gets a 50 crap, because it really devalues a 50. If every time someone makes a dunk, there's a very good chance they're gonna get a 50. Well, bring back the half score then. Or make it so a judge has the option one time to vote and score it an 11 or a 10.5 or something, just to break any kind of tie. They only get to use that once. I don't know, something. But I do like we watch all the dunks first, and then we judge, not just the immediacy of the moment. And perhaps that'd be a more equitable way to decide who the winner of this is, as opposed to what we got in the judges conspiring. And Chadwick Boseman didn't look like he had any fun. He's sitting right there, and it didn't seem like he was talking much to the other judges. And he was, never. I don't recall ever seeing his face where he was blown away by a dunk. Perhaps he was just so zoned in on wanting to get the scoring right that he was just focused and locked in on okay, well, how does that really resonate with me? But yeah, as much as I think this is ridiculous to say, I think on some level Dwayne Wade should be ashamed of rigging the dunk competition so a Miami Heat player could win it. Derrick Jones Jr. is a hell of a dunker, but Aaron Gordon won that thing. Just like a couple of years ago when he went off against Zach LaVine, both of them were amazing, but Aaron Gordon won that. The degree of difficulty, the uniqueness, the originality in that dunk competition, I think he stole it, overwhelmingly. So, anyway, that was All-Star Weekend. The three-point competition was great. Buddy Hield, stole it at the very last minute and had to close out strong. Devin Booker, last-minute replacement, came in, filled in very well for Lillard. And for those wondering, I lost to Mark Fernandez. He had his team scored 159 points. Mine scored 153. And I think the difference, honestly, was Rudy Gobert in the All-Star game, putting up 21 points. Neither of us saw that because, him and Sabonis and whatever, the centers got taken late. And but I think Gobert was the difference. But Fernandez won that. I actually owe him 20, and I forgot to stop at an ATM today to get him that. So I'll have to get him this $20 next week. But in the three-point competition, so since he lost Lillard and got Booker, then I was getting Booker in the three-point competition because I had chosen Lillard. And I was like, wow, I've got a shot at this. It wouldn't have made a difference. He ultimately would have won the game because he had the dunk competition. Although I would have called shenanigans on that because that was a bunch of BS on Wade's part. And I think all results should have been thrown out on that. And if that's the case, then I would have thrown out the three-point competition. We would have just gone with the score of the All-Star game just to make it fair. But, yeah, overall, I didn't watch the skills challenge. I saw the highlights to see who won. But it's not that exciting to see a guy pass a ball through a tire. Is it a skill? Yes. And was it interesting that the big men were better at these skills than the guards and the forwards? Yeah, it was interesting to watch to some degree. But I would rather see a one-on-one tournament or a two-on-two. But a one-on-one would be utterly fantastic of just the pool of all-stars. To see who's the best one-on-one player, because, that would be wildly entertaining as well if you did that instead of the skills challenge on Saturday. But I don't know, how you do that for all those players unless you make the games really short. But then who wants to play? If I'm that guy, or one of those guys, do I want to play just a game to 5 in the first round maybe, and then the second round you play 7, and then how many ever rounds there are goes up a little bit, goes up, and then the final you're playing to like 10 or 12 or 15 or something. But a one-on-one tournament would be excellent. But there are already guys that would opt out, like Westbrook. Someone asked him about it, and he's like, "Basketball is not one-on-one; it's a team sport." Yes, but basketball is also played by you, Westbrook, and everybody else at tons of different times in your life. You play the game. You play one-on-one. That's the beauty of basketball. Unlike other sports, you only need really yourself, and you can go out and shoot, but you get one other person, you can play a game. You can't do that with any other major American sport. You can throw a football or a baseball around, but it doesn't really have the same stakes. So one-on-one tournament could be interesting. But overall, kudos to the NBA. The All-Star weekend was a hit. The only real controversy I saw was Kanye was giving away his new sneakers, and some of the trucks were asking people to swap in the shoes they had for a pair of the new Kanye's. That's the only real controversy that I saw from Chicago. And Adidas said that is not their official policy, and they should not have been doing that. But and to their understanding or knowledge, it didn't happen. But then video popped up online of people trading their shoes for the new Kanye's. So outside of that, though, no real controversy that I can think of off the top of my head. And it was great for the league. So here we go. Let's move into the regular season. The buyout market, guys, is officially upon us. Sorry about that, little water. After the trade deadline comes the buyout market, where teams, if they couldn't get anything for player X, now will buy them out to save a little bit of money if they know that there's no real chance of re-signing them, and there wasn't any market for them, and they couldn't get an asset of any kind for the individual. It's like what Memphis swore they would never do with Iguodala. They would just sit him with the team, and they would eat that cost. Instead of doing a buyout, they wanted something in return. Well, there are players that teams aren't willing to trade over assets for. They're not willing to forego part of their future to get this individual. And teams go, you know what? We'll go ahead and buy you out. You can go find a home somewhere else, and we'll save a little money, and it's better for you. And it helps them with free agents and whatnot, and agents in general going forward, just because if they're willing to work with players, then agents are now willing to help get their clients in front of those front offices. It's a two-way system. So there have been 2 buyouts thus far, and there are others that are looming. Let's see, DeMarre Carroll got bought out by the Spurs, and he is set to join the Rockets. And the Spurs are debating on what they're going to do with the remaining salary that they owe him, because he signed a 3-year deal in the offseason. They're going to buy him out now, and then they have the option to just pay next year at full, and then the year after that, I think that it's only like $1.1 million or $1.2 million, something along those lines. Or they can do a stretch provision over the remaining 3 years to reduce the overall cap hit next year if they so choose. But DeMarre Carroll is going to be joining the Rockets. And then, interestingly, the Rockets also signed free agent Jeff Green to a 10-day contract, and that was by Green's decision. He wanted to basically see if it was a good fit with the Rockets before committing to them for the rest of the season. So he signed a 10-day with them. So the Rockets have now made some decent changes, and they're going full on small ball. They've got 4 former Thunder players in Harden, Westbrook, Cephalosha, and now Jeff Green. But they pick up Covington. They've got Jeff Green. They've got DeMarre Carroll, and they've got Bruno Caboclo, which Bruno will not be playing for them. And then to make room for these guys, they sent Isaiah Hartenstein and somebody else down to their G League. And I love that as soon as I read Hartenstein's name, I remember that there were Rockets fans online saying, a little while ago that they wish D'Antoni would give him more run to see what, how he would mesh with this team. And then once Capella was moved out, there was more of that discussion kind of percolating up to the top, saying, okay, well, now it's Hartenstein. Let's see how he gels in this. And they're shipping him down to the G League because they're full bore going into this small ball where Covington is their largest player at 6'6". P.J. Tucker, after that, I think he's 6'6". Or Covington's 6'7". P.J. Tucker's 6'6". And it's interesting to watch. They've only had, 4 games in this new style. But the difference is, so now it's a 5-out spacing at all times with them. And what that means is, so you're going to have Harden or Westbrook bring it down top of the key. They're going to be the primary ball handler coming up. And you're putting 2 shooters in the corner and 2 shooters at the top of the wings. All 5 people are outside the three-point line. Now, what this does and why it's advantageous for the Rockets, at least how they are currently constructed, is it makes those driving lanes wide open, just flat out wide open. And they can do interesting little subsets within that. So, obviously, when you get Westbrook the ball, then they can do a pick and roll, but it's really a screen to get a better situation for Westbrook to take advantage of. Like if you watched them play the Lakers every time they would try and get a screen for Westbrook to have to switch over for Caruso to switch over to Westbrook. And then it becomes can you stop Westbrook with his superior athleticism, Caruso? It's really difficult for him to do, and no, he can't do it every once and again, but he can't shut Westbrook down. And teams are still committed to basically putting a man on Harden. Even when he's 35 feet away from the basket, you will see a defender on him within a couple feet, and he is so far away, but just creates all this spacing. And now they can do basically drag screens that are wide open. They can do like a modified pin down / hammer action in the corners to get open threes over there when guys drive, and the off man will screen for whoever the shooter and the corner is going to be, and his man is kind of paying attention to where the ball is, and by the time he realizes it's a kick out to the corner, the person that was on the wing has gone down to set a screen, so they're turning around, boom, they hit that screen, and there's the shooter, which is like a PJ Tucker, is wide open in the corner for a three, so those actions are even more wide. And if Harden gets the ball and he drives into the lane, there are still times when defenses will collapse onto him, and you have now 4 shooters on the outside and just find the open man over and over and over again. In the Celtics game, they were trying to hedge their bets and keep their arms wide and stay in those passing lanes as best they can to mitigate having to double down onto Harden and to slow down any kind of kickouts. But they ended up, losing that game. But I'll be interested to see how this plays out for the Rockets. I mean, this is very much Morey. I mean, they got rid of Capella because when Capella sets the screen, his only option at that point is to roll down to the rim. He is not going to pop out for a three, so it clogs the lane and it reduces those smaller guys getting the easier buckets in the lane. So perhaps by eliminating that, Covington becomes your tallest player. Everybody can shoot threes. You have wide open lanes by NBA standards to get in for those shots. Could be interesting. It could be very well, interesting. I just question when it comes to playoff times, what do you do about Anthony Davis? Is PJ Tucker really going to have to D him up, or Covington for a 7-game series? Or are you just going to cede, we'll have AD get his points. We just got to shut down LeBron and make sure nobody else kills us. Danny Green doesn't kill us from 3 or anyone else. Or they don't have as great a problem with that with, say, the Clippers because their center lineup isn't as strong. But Jokic, Rudy Gobert, it'll be tough for them to square up against these taller elite centers on these other teams. So it'll be interesting as we close out. Every team has somewhere between 27 and 29 games to see how this plays out for the Rockets. But, Morey has to be fighting for his job, unofficially losing that money from China. So games are streaming on Tencent again, but, they're not playing as openly on, I think, Chinese media. So the NBA is going to take a hit on that revenue. And they're saying for the personal revenue of the Rockets itself, the projection, the few weeks of the fallout after his Hong Kong tweet, they're saying the Rockets are going to lose about $20 million in corporate sponsorship and endorsements or whatever the case is. So the loss of the money coupled with if they flame out in the playoffs again, D'Antoni is not, he's a lame duck coach. Will Morey be fired? And if that's the case, man, that's a GM that I think almost every team outside of, the Clippers, OKC, Miami, Boston, there's a handful that they like, what they have. Like Neil O'Shea, I think is fine. But if as a Bulls fan, I want Garpax fired, and if Morey's out there, great. Heck, I'd love to have Hinkie. But if Morey, I think, is fighting for his job, and if they flame out, he put all his chips in on this. They've sacrificed so many first-round picks to make all these moves, to get Westbrook, to get Covington, to create this team as it is. Their best option, if they flame out again, is probably to ship out James Harden. He has the most value of any individual, and they could get the greatest haul for him. And they just have to hit a hard reset because they're not going to win a championship with this payroll and the lack of future assets. If they can't do it now, they're only getting older, and they're more and more hamstrung by their cap situation. So, kudos to the Rockets for taking a big swing and zigging while most other elite teams have zagged, and just going super small, and they can only go super small by comparison. I mean, it's still 6'7" and 6'6". It's not super small, but when you're going up against 7-footers, it's small. All right, so on to the next buyout, which is Reggie Jackson has been bought out by the Detroit Pistons. I'm sure everybody on some level was hoping that Derrick Rose would somehow get out of Detroit. I would love to see Derrick on a contender, potentially salvage his Hall of Fame credentials, because as of right now, he'll be the only MVP that doesn't make the Hall of Fame. But if he managed to be an elite six-man on a championship team and get at least one chip, potentially, if he got into the right situation, maybe more than one, that'd be awesome. I would love to see Derrick Rose shine on the brightest stages, like I used to watch him do night in, night out. And anyway, so Reggie Jackson, who I'm sure Detroit is by and large lamented the fact that they gave him that big contract when they did. And, John Wall being flabbergasted all those years ago, comparing the contract that Reggie Jackson signed upon leaving OKC compared to what his is borne out to be accurate. I mean, at the time, I think all of us was like, wow, good for Reggie Jackson. I don't know that I would have paid him that much. But he had shown flashes of being able to run his own team, but he just couldn't stay healthy at all. And now, this season, so he gets bought out by Detroit, and he is going to join the Clippers. That's where he's going to go. So the Clippers have made an addition of Marcus Morris and now Reggie Jackson. And upon the pickup of Reggie Jackson, then the scuttlebutt online is like, okay, it's official. They're much deeper than the Lakers, so they are the favorite to get out of the West, which I have said, since early on in the season that their depth gives them a distinct advantage. The Lakers were there's no way they could have made real additions to their roster outside of the buyout market because they sacrificed so much to go out and get AD, and right now they're first in the West. But they could use another shooter, they could use another point guard. So I would imagine the odds are now, weighted in the Clippers' favor. But I think the only drawback to that is when you watch the two teams, the Lakers play with a sense of urgency, and they seem to be getting along. They seem to have fun out there when they're playing, and there's a camaraderie and a bonhomie that you can sense from afar. And I've heard, like Danny Green was on Zach Lowe's podcast and talking about this is the best team environment that he's ever been a part of. And it seems genuine, like when guys are laughing and having a good time or celebrating when one of their teammates does something on the court. In no way does that look false. And on the flip side, the Clippers may have the depth, but, man, they don't look checked in. You watch certain games, and they could give two shits, it seems like. They're acting as though they're the Warriors from last year, the year before, of like, man, we have made so many finals runs that I am tired, and the regular season is meaningless, and all we need to do is get to the playoffs, and then we can turn the switch on because we've done it before. Which, when you have all that talent, I guess there's that, that seems potentially like something you could feel and it'd be valid within that thought. But given the fact that Kawhi is the only one, to my recollection, on this roster that has won a championship, And he's the only one by rights that can act like this. And I don't know. They've had some turmoil. There was a few weeks back where Mo Harkless was saying, like, basically we need to get our shit together because some nights we show up and other nights we don't. And you could already get that sense as a fan when you watched them. But just to hear that bubble up from the locker room, that it comes through to the media, because most guys keep that, behind closed doors, like Al Horford did in Philly when they were saying, is this akin to when you were with Kyrie on the Celtics last year? And he's like, yeah, listen, that stays in the locker room, and we don't talk about that with you. Whereas, the Clippers at times have talked about the fact that there is no real sense of urgency night in, night out for them to gel and to come together. So they may have the depth, but, I don't think this is a fait accompli like it looked like on paper to me at the start of the season when you're just looking at the depth. The fact that the Clippers took 2 off the Warriors last year and the Warriors were at full health. Clay hadn't gone down hurt and Durant hadn't gone down hurt and whatnot, and they still managed to get 2. They had the biggest comeback in NBA playoff history. And then you just add Kawhi and Paul George to that. You're like, oh, my God, these guys are going to be flat out unstoppable. And thus far, I don't know. So, yes, does Reggie Jackson help? Yeah, without a doubt. Coming off the bench, he's a guy that more than likely gets you 8 to 12 and, solid ball handling and, be steady on that second unit. Especially you put them out there like next to Lou Williams, and Lou is going to be the primary, but it's another guy that can drive, create, make a defense collapse down. They can do a kick out to whoever may be out there at that time, if they're going to put Morris out there or Landry Shamet or whoever the case may be. But I'll be interested, man, because the Marcus Morris pickup too, it's like, okay, you have an ISO player in Kawhi. You have an ISO player in Paul George. You have, in essence, an ISO player in Lou Williams. And you could say, to some degree, kind of this duality of ISOs in Lou and Montrez, because they just run this 2-man game whenever it's the 2 of them out there. That's really effective. But now you're adding another ball stopper in Marcus Morris. Like, okay, you're reducing the fluidity of the offense as a whole. You're adding a very good player, but is that going to stymie what the height of the ceiling what your offense could be? I don't know. We shall see. But I'm not sure. Yes, they have the depth, but man, they don't play like it. They play lazy certain nights where it's just like, yeah, whatever. It's regular season. And even if they did manage to get home court and they're playing the Lakers at any point during the playoffs, Lakers are going to have home court that entire series. But you would want it against every other team. The West is going to be difficult to get out of. I mean, Memphis looks frisky right now. Now they got to take on the Lakers because they're in the 8th spot if the playoffs were to start today. But, they're still frisky. They're still an interesting team. OKC is just above them, and OKC is competent. The Trailblazers are, nipping at the heels. Dame's going to be out for a little bit with that groin. They're not entirely sure when he'll be back. Speculative, could be a week, could be, they don't know. It's not going to be like the Kyrie thing where now he's going to be out. But I don't know. The Reggie Jackson's a solid pickup. Let's see what the Clippers can do with this going forward. The other big news coming out of Cleveland is John Beilein, former University of Michigan coach, is out. J.B. Bickerstaff is going to take over once again for the 3rd time. Coach, I guess technically, John isn't fired. He and the team agreed to mutually part ways. But if you've been paying attention, there's been stuff getting out that the players aren't exactly buying into what he was selling. And that whole thugs comment where you guys were playing like a bunch of thugs from a film session from like a month ago or so, and he had to come out and apologize and say, I meant to say slugs. And I think it was Colin Sexton came out and said, no, or maybe it was Darius Garland, who's one of their 2 young guards, came out and was like, no, I'm pretty sure he said slugs. He defended him, but nobody else did. And all reports out of there have been the players aren't really buying into the system. And then now with the reports coming out that they are going to part ways, it's been even more of that where players now, according to reporters in the know, they've been checked out since very early on in the season. You could see the discontent from Kevin Love several times in games this season. He wanted out. He wanted to be traded. He got into a screaming match with Altman, their GM. According to a report that I read today, Andre Drummond, who was freshly traded there, after a short time with the team, told some individuals that if they don't get rid of Beeline, that he would not. There is no chance that he would resign with the Cavs in the offseason, which I'm not entirely sure about that because he's got a player option for $29 million after this season. And, is Andre Drummond going to find a team willing to give him $29 million next year? I don't think so. Now, perhaps he'd be willing to sacrifice that a la Harrison Barnes for a 4-year deal somewhere to get, sacrifice it this year, sign a longer-term deal where he gets more money overall than he would command in the free agent market. And it might behoove him to do that this year because they're saying the free agent class this year is, by all accounts, no team is really coveting. They're all setting up for 21 when you've got the likes of Giannis and Kawhi and Paul George and several other players going to be out in the mix. So maybe he does opt out because he can get a better long-term deal after this, but I think it's going to be tough to find anybody willing to pay you close to $29 million. But if he is honest about that, that just shows you the amount of distrust between the players and the coach. And Biggerstaff was apparently going to be groomed for the head coaching position. He was the associate head coach or something along those lines. But now this is his third team that he's taken over when they've axed the head coach. He took over for Kevin McHale when the Rockets fired him. And he took over for David Fizdale when the Grizzlies fired him. And I think most people felt that he did a good enough job, especially with the Grizzlies. If memory serves, it's been a long time since I've thought about that he should have been looked at to take over the job going forward. But Biggerstaff takes over, and this is the Cavs' 6th coach in 7 seasons. You can't really establish any kind of winning culture when you're bringing in constantly new coaches who have new systems. So Biggerstaff has been elevated to the title of head coach. He doesn't have the interim tag. He is their coach. I don't know for how many years. I didn't see any kind of report upon coming in here before I got here that, they extended him for 2 years or 3 years or however long his current contract with the Cavs was as the associate head coach. So what if they already had him under contract like they did Beeline for, I think Beeline's is 4 more years, which is another little interesting thing is he is walking away from that money as well. He is agreed to just kind of leave it's in the ballpark. I think it's a little over $20 million over the next 4 years that he is walking away from, which is kind of impressive. It's a nice, I'm not going to hold you guys over the fire about this. Hold your feet to the fire. Let's just agree to actually part ways, and I can move on and do something that I'm happy with, and you guys can find whoever you want for the head coach that you think is going to be best for this. And with that switch, are they going to be players in the buyout market themselves? Because it makes sense for them to buy out Tristan Thompson if they don't feel like they can re-sign him. He's at 18.5. If they buy him out, they'll save a little bit of money overall. They're under the tax. The salary tax is above 132 points. It's like 132.1 or 132.2, something along those lines. And they're at 129 to 130-ish. So they're below the tax. They don't have to worry about that. But they could also cut payroll, and they'd save a little bit of money this year if they just buy him out. And if he could indicate to them that he has no intention of signing with them, they might as well save a little money because it's not like you want to improve as the season goes on unless you want to establish some sort of winning culture and you're only going to get so much better anyway. But I don't know. It makes more sense to me to buy him out. He can go and find a place that he wants to play at, and then, to the right team, he can make a hell of a difference. Say to like the Clippers, who need a center. Montrezl Harrell cannot, when he's out on the floor, their defensive rebounding plummets. So you get somebody else out there who's sturdier, more stout than like Zubac, and they've got somebody now to defend your ADs, Jokic's, and Gobert's. Now, I like, obviously, all three of those guys better, but I think he could do a better job overall of at least slowing those guys down a little bit compared to their current lineup as it exists. But he's limited. His offensive game is pretty limited. Although he did have a night the other day where he made several three-pointers. I believe he's got more three-pointers this season than Ben Simmons. So there's that. All right, so Cavs, you're making a switch. Maybe it's the right one going forward for you. And Bickerstaff can, make heads or tails of the young core that you have and perhaps get it to work together better than Beeline could have. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Another little interesting development the past couple of days is Kyrie Irving has re-aggravated his shoulder injury that kept him out of 26 games so far this year. And they're saying there is no real timeline on him coming back. So Kyrie is now out once again. And so I looked it up. First off right now, so I believe they're in 7th. Yeah, they're in 7th. The Brooklyn Nets are 25-28, sitting in 7th position. Orlando Magic are 2 games back of them at 24-31. And then after that, it's the Wizards at 20-33, the Bulls at 19-36, the Hornets at 18-36. Like, it's the crap du jour below that. And I like the Nets squad overall better than I do any of those teams below. I think the combination of their pieces is more interesting. So I don't see them slipping out of the playoff hunt in the craptacular bottom of the East. But I looked up their best 5-man lineups with Kyrie going out. So with Kyrie, they're 8-12. That's their record with Kyrie. And without, they're 17-16. So it's not like without Kyrie, they're blowing the doors off of people. But at 17-16, that gives them, and they'd still be at that win percentage. They'd still be in 7th place, but they'd be nipping at the heels of the Pacers, who have struggled to really put Oladipo into the mix, which there's enough time they can figure it out by the end. And I wouldn't worry too much, Pacers fans, in that, you're adding your best player back, and Brogdon has flourished and Sabonis have flourished, or they both have flourished, rather, in his absence, and they just now need to figure out everybody's role within this team. But it's going to be up and down. You're 3-7 in your last 10. It's not ideal, but you've got a nice lead, a 6-game lead on 6th place. And if you right the ship, Philly's still up and down. You could make it to 5th. Even hypothetically back up to, like, say, 4th. The Heat are 4-6 in their last 10, and the Sixers are 5-5. So the 2 teams above you aren't running away with this. So you could still make a nice climb here, as evidenced by the Raptors rattling off all those wins. So anyway, the Nets 8-12 with Kyrie, 17-16 without. Now what's interesting is, if you go to NBA.com and you can figure out the best 5-man lineups who've played a minimum of 100 minutes together, and the second best at that minimum of 100 minutes together is the Nets lineup with Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, Harris, Prince, and Jarrett Allen. And their net rating is 22.3 with that lineup. 22.3. It's the second best in the league. They're scoring, their offensive rating, they're averaging 118 points a game with that lineup. And their defensive rating is they're giving up 95.7, which is flat out amazing. Now, granted, it's only over 111 minutes. To put that in perspective, Milwaukee is like 5th or 6th on that list, and they're starting their main 5-man rotation has 340 minutes together. Now, they would have more, but like I said earlier, Giannis and the main guys are only playing basically as long as they need to until the game is in hand. So they would have even more minutes under their belt with that group. But still, 111 minutes is enough of a sample size to where you get an understanding of how that group of guys plays together. And at 22.3, that's pretty excellent. Perhaps, and that would more than likely be what their starting 5 would be, because their previous version, when Kyrie out, had Garrett Temple in there in place of Karis LeVert, and that 5-man has put together like 400 and something minutes, and they're in like the 60s as far as overall net rating. So it's not that. If they move beyond Garrett Temple, and this 111 minutes is representative of who they are, with this core of potentially a starting 5, that team's pretty legit if those numbers can bear out. Now, granted, there's no way you can keep a 22.3 point, a net differential or net rating, if they were to play out the remaining 27, 29 games with those guys. But at the same time, it's a nice forecast of the possibilities and give you a perspective. The other, 5-man rotation with Kyrie, which is Kyrie, Dinwiddie, Harris, Prince, and Allen. They took out LeVert, just like they previously did when Kyrie was out, and they put Temple in for LeVert. That one is 33rd best in the league, and their net rating is 5.4. And the offensive rating is 111.6, and the defensive rating is 106.1. So they're, I'd be more concerned with the defensive rating. They're giving up 11 points as opposed to losing 7 or 6.5. That giving up 11 points, the difference with that is pretty huge. And Kyrie has sowed a lot of seeds of discontent within that. Like, there was, right around the new year when he was saying, we're 1 to 2 pieces away. We've got guys in this locker room, but if we really want to contend, we need to make some changes. And she's like, dude, you need to shut up with that because you're the new guy. Most of these guys have been together for a long time. And last year they were a frisky, interesting, little team. You should be the addition to this that propels them. And so far, they're roughly the same with you. You have not made the difference. And technically, the piece you're missing is the 7-footer who, if you watch, there was a great clip posted of him working out yesterday, I believe it was. And, dude, it's 3 after 3 after 3, and he's worked up a hell of a sweat. And then he's running drills with assistant coaches and whatnot where he's doing pull-ups, and his fluidity looks pretty strong. And granted, this is the same thing when we saw all the clips of, like, Markelle Fultz, and he's shooting from outside, or Ben Simmons in practice, or before games shooting threes. Like, this isn't game speed, but that hamstring does not look like it slowed him down. His three-point shot looks just as solid, and perhaps this just moves him into a different facet of his game where how do you stop a 7-footer who shoots this well from 3, and it becomes a slightly different player. But that's the piece you're missing, as opposed to riling up your teammates by saying, hey, you aren't enough. We can't win with you, or this team can't really compete for a championship as it's currently constructed. So you need to keep me and KD and DeAndre Jordan because he's our buddy, and ship out everybody else. Or ship out, a few of these guys to fill in pieces around us. I do think that maybe they should find a new home for Dinwiddie because he would flourish on a different team. And my guess is long-term he'll be stymied, having to play second fiddle and now third or fourth fiddle once KD gets back, depending on, how exactly they roll those lineups out, because he won't be the first or second option for sure. And then depending on matchups, they might end up going to big men before they go to him in certain games. But with the re-aggravation of the shoulder injury, and they're not really playing for a championship now. They're looking forward to next year. They, by rights, could just have Kyrie sit out for an extended period of time and let this new squad come in with your Dinwiddie, LeVert, Harris, Prince, and Allen, and see if they can actually make a push. And perhaps, they, like the Pacers, if they manage to turn this around, they're 6 games back, but if the Pacers or the Sixers or the Heat continue to be up and down and struggle and play 500 or sub 5, and they're playing 750 ball, they're winning 3 out of 4 for the next 27 games, they could vault over. They could end up in the 6th position, maybe the 5th position, and suddenly they have a more advantageous matchup in the first round. Maybe they make it out of that. I don't know. If they had to play Miami in the first round and they maintained it to 4, could they take Miami? I would still favor Miami. But at the same time, if that new squad is putting together a consistency and they're all playing for each other, the ball's moving, they're finding the open man, they're not just going to the ISO Kyrie and making a defense guess as to where the threat is coming from. Perhaps anything is possible in this modern NBA where you hit enough threes and you're never really shot out of a game. So Kyrie is now out, and they're not entirely sure when he gets back, but we'll see how the Nets do in the interim. And then finally, because this is slow, we can just do projections, and I'm happy to sit here and do projections if you want. Will Toronto close out this strong? Can Boston overtake them for the 2 seed? If they have to square off as the 2-3, because they would before, ultimately it'd be the 1-4 would take on and be Miami and Milwaukee if it started today. So they have to play. Who would you like between the two of them? That's going to be a super interesting matchup. And in the West, it's Lakers, Nuggets, Clippers, Jazz, Rockets, Thunder, Mavericks, and Grizzlies as of right now. The Mavericks and the Thunder are tied for 6-7, but the Mavericks are put above them in the standings. My guess is they have. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. That's how it breaks down. And we can sit here and be like, oh, well, if this happens or that happens, and then, the Jazz, now that they've gotten Conley back into the rotation, they're 5-5, but they were lights out without him. It's kind of like the Oladipo thing. Slowly work him back in, and then everybody figures out their place on this team. Ingles was lights out as a starter, so you don't want to really limit his minutes, and that opened up their offense quite a bit. But yeah, so to close out, the only other speculative story is Jay Wright from Villanova, who's a great college coach, is being pursued by the Knicks for their vacant head coaching job. And you know what? I actually kind of like this for the Knicks. It's kind of smart. It's a little bit out of the box. By all accounts, he could be the next Brad Stevens, where it's a great mind, and he can come in and, you've got a youngish team with, Robinson and R.J. Barrett, and can you salvage Kevin Knox? And maybe he could get Ntilikina to turn the corner. But the word is that Wright, the only job that he would be interested in is the 76ers, which hometown. Villanova, if I'm not mistaken, is in Philadelphia. Villanova is in Philadelphia. Smart. You don't have to move to a new city. You don't have to relocate your family. You already have a presence with the fan base there, and they have an affinity and affection for you. And as of right now, man, Brett Brown knows his job is on the line. If the Sixers, who finally made a change and put Al Horford on the bench because it just doesn't really seem to be working with him, Embiid, and Simmons out there, because in essence you kind of have 3 big men out there with Simmons, who is not going to shoot from outside, so his points are going to come from 10 feet within, and you have him, and then that would force Embiid out to be basically a wing guy when he can shoot from out there, but he's also dangerously effective as evidenced by that little dream shake that he did on LeBron. If you get him with inside 10 feet, yes, he can close strong on the basket, but he can also do these little dream shakes. He's got a nice fade. So they moved Horford to the bench, and Korkmaz has been put in the starting rotation. But if Brett Brown cannot get these two superstars to mesh and they flame out in the playoffs, most people felt that they would make a change in the offseason last year until the players came out and said, we love Brett Brown and we want him to stay and we want him to be our coach. And Elton Brand and management and ownership stayed with Brett Brown for another year. But this is, if they flame out and they can't make the push. And last year, I genuinely feel like they were a bouncing ball away from making the finals. And if the injuries continue to happen to the Warriors like that, then they could have a championship right now. They were. I mean, Jimmy Butler was the playmaker that they needed late in the game. It's like leading up to the trade deadline, Elton Brand was like, we're going to be in the market for a playmaker because they didn't re-sign the one that they had, who in the playoffs last year, they just said, here are the keys to the offense. We're going to push Ben Simmons down to the dunker spot, and you create and facilitate and open up. Drive down, make the defense collapse, kick out to Tobias Harris, kick out to J.J. Redick, create some dynamic motion within this offense. So if Brett Brown can't find that and they don't make it beyond, say, the second round, I mean, if they lose in the first round, for sure he's gone. But if they can't make it out of the second, then my guess is he's gone. And if Jay Wright is already putting it out into the ether that is the only job that he would look at, then, it's smart. You're angling for a job that's more than likely going to be there. And it could be a good fit for you and for the team. I'm not, for every Brad Stevens, there's a Calipari, there's a Rick Pitino, there's a Billy Donovan, although this year Billy Donovan has put together, a solid record, but how much of that do you credit him and how much do you credit Chris Paul basically changing the identity of that team? You have to give some credit to Billy Donovan, but by and large, college coaches, it's not the easiest transition to the bigs. Just because you've lost the power. In college, it's all about the coach, and the coach determines everything. Determines who gets the scholarships, determines who gets the playing time, and the coach is the star, the celebrity, the face, the most known individual on that team. Then you come to the pros, and you can get fired if the star player wants you out. You make less money than just about every person that you're supposed to have authority over. So it's not the easiest transition for these guys. So you have to earn their respect. And all I've heard about Jay Wright is he's a good coach. Guys play hard for him. He runs a good system. So perhaps he can bring some innovation a la Brad Stevens and, get these two guys to mesh and figure out an offense that tailors to the skills that each of these two guys have. And also, the front office needs to go out and make moves that better accentuates what these guys can do. Like losing J.J. Redick. J.J. Redick was tailor-made for everything that your team was constructed on. If Ben Simmons isn't going to shoot threes and you need somebody out there that's going to stretch the defense, then you need a sharp-shooting three-point shooter. So, I can understand losing Butler if you didn't want to sign him because there's also the discord that he may or may not have brought into the locker room. Maybe he didn't because he's so headstrong. Maybe he didn't get along with everybody in the locker room as best you would want for a max guy. But Redick isn't a max guy, and you could have gotten Redick for the same price that New Orleans paid him. So, I don't know. But Jay Wright to Philly is super interesting. And, kudos to the Knicks for going out there and coming up with a name and an idea that basically isn't a retread. And they're taking a chance on somebody that could be interesting. And perhaps Jay Wright changes his tune if Brett Brown doesn't get fired, although I would imagine the Knicks want to make some sort of firm decision before then, although they need to find a GM before they do anything else. And I don't know if they're still waiting on Masai, but the Raptors price tag on if they want to get Masai is going to be pretty hefty. And if I'm Masai at that point, do I want to go to a team where I just sacrificed future draft picks to enable this this transition or this move? And also, if I'm Masai, I want full autonomy and control. Like I get 4 to 5 years where I'm allowed to do anything I want with this roster, and I have no oversight. Allow me to construct a team and create a long-term vision for what we can do. Basically give them like the R.C. Buford. You have all the job security in the world. Go out and construct a team. Make him a Sam Presti. Make him a long tenured before he even starts, because he's got the chops. But Toronto's asking price is going to be at least a couple firsts, if not maybe 3 firsts. And that's a tough pill to swallow for a team that's somewhat rebuilding. And, RJ Barrett looked really good on that U.S. versus Internationals rookie, sophomore, young guys game. It's amazing when you surround him with excellent talent how good he can really be. So perhaps if they got instead of signing every forward available on the free agent market. Now, granted, they signed him to short-term deals, so they were at least wise in that regard. But perhaps be a little bit more judicious as to the types of individuals and the style that you're trying to play with this young core. Should really be building around Barrett and Robinson and figure out what those two can do and just surround them with pieces around there. But hire a GM first before you get to coach, because the GM is going to want to put his stamp on this team. And if the coach flames out after like a year to a year and a half, the Knicks have no problem pulling the plug. If you just look at their recent history, guys don't make it long if they don't produce immediately. Whereas if you come in with a Masai and he's got a long, someone of that caliber, and they have the ability to make all the changes they want, they can get a coach then and tell the coach, you've got 3-4 years. Your job security is completely fine. Let's build this the right way and build long term. So hopefully the Knicks do the smart thing, and the long-suffering Knicks fans have something to cheer for, have something to look forward to. As a basketball fan, I like it when the Knicks are good. Now, I don't want to see the Knicks win a championship because coming out of the East, I'd like it to be my team. But, we can't make heads or tails of our roster either. And given the injuries, Wendell Carter's out. Chris Dunn is probably done for the year with an MCL sprain. The future is me and other Bulls fans hoping that they finally fire Garpax. And if Morey gets canned, hey, go get Daryl Morey. Give him all the money that he needs in the world, and let's do this the right way. Have him build and shape this roster and create a contender, a yearly contender, even if it's like the Rockets where we're close to championship level. That would be better than the quagmire of mediocrity to terrible that we've been in for the past X number of years since the height of Tibbs. And really, since Jordan's departure. But the height of Tibbs, at least we were in the mix. And if there was no LeBron in the East, which is a big if, we could have maybe made a finals. But anyway, that is it for Dimes this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I put it together for you, considering that it's all speculative and you can only talk about basically what's transpired, the All-Star game and then the buyout market and everything like that. It felt more like a solo show than a guest show to me. But don't worry, I've got a bunch of your favorites already lined up, coming up in the near future. And we're going to close this out strong. This has been a hell of a season, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. I'm looking forward to games resuming tomorrow night. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know on YouTube or hit me up on Twitter at Matt Nost, MATTKNOST. Let Collider know that you're enjoying the show. I am only here. I'm the last sports show left because of basically your support out there. You guys have been such fervent fans. If you could help spread the word, it would ensure, potentially this year going into the free agency and whatnot and extending the show out there, maybe taking a month's hiatus in August, something like that. August, maybe into middle of September. But, the show would run longer and then we could bring it back for next season. And I'm only here because of all of your support out there. The fact that you guys enjoy listening to me talk about basketball, for those of you who like the game as much as I do. Thank you so much for tuning in this week and every week. Means the world to me. I love talking basketball, and it also gives me an excuse with my wife to watch even more basketball. So I appreciate that, and that's my thank you to you, because I would still be watching, but I do get to watch a handful more games each week. It's just like, babe, I have to watch this Atlanta Orlando game because Aaron Gordon might be bought out. There's still talk of that, although they're going to hold on to him. I'd like to see Aaron Gordon move on. He needs a new home. Maybe he could end up turning into Draymond Green or something like that. But anyway, my thanks to all of you out there that support the show. Once again, you can follow me anywhere at Matt Nost. That's it for Dropping Dimes this week. I will see you guys next week. Adios.